Hi guys, so I decided to do a best books of the year so far list, a favorite reads of the year so far list this year, because as you may have noticed, I let things slide a bit in the wrap up and review department since about February, I think, or the beginning of March. And there were some books on this list that I made of favorite books that I've read so far this year that I'm not sure I will talk about a lot in the future, if at all. I'm pretty sure they won't end up on my best books of the year list at the end of the year. But still, nevertheless, I think they deserve some recognition on my channel and online in general. And so I made a list of my 10 favorite reads of the year so far. However, this isn't exactly a top 10 list because the last three books that I'm going to mention more or less share the top spot. And the first couple of books are really rather honorable mentions. Anyway, enough with the introductions. Here we go. Book number 10 is Das geheime Leben der Bäume, The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. This is German non-fiction about trees, about the life cycle of trees and about the ecology of the forest. This may be rather simplistic at times or simplifying things to a large degree at times, and it is definitely rather unscientific at times. However, it just gives you so many cool facts about trees and will make you look on trees very differently when you go hiking, for instance. And the author's love of the subject and his love of trees just shines through every page. So I definitely gained a lot of new knowledge from this book, and it was also just a very emotionally satisfying reading experience. My other honorable mention is the Psychop series by Jordan Castillo Price. This is just trashy paranormal romantic suspense about a psychic gay homicide detective in Chicago who can talk to the dead, or rather, the dead can talk to him. And they often do, and sometimes they are even helpful when it comes to solving crimes and catching murderers. This is just compulsively readable, compulsively bingeable. I only discovered this series, or I only read the first book a couple of weeks ago, and I'm already on book 4 right now. Next up is The Memory of Souls by Jen Lyons. This is the third book in the epic fantasy series A Chorus of Dragons, and this is a return to form after the horrific second book in the series, The Name of All Things. I'm so glad that I am over this bump, and now, hopefully, from now on, it will be smooth sailing as far as my relationship to the series is concerned. This is book 3 in a series, so I obviously can't say much about this, only that it keeps being interesting in the way that it is told, and it is also full of lovable characters, mostly of lovable characters. I'd recommend that epic fantasy readers check this out. However, there's one caveat, and that is that the writing style, both in direct speech and outside of it, is quite informal, quite modern sounding, almost at times a bit reminiscent of social media speak. And it was just just barely this side of annoying to me. However, if you are a bit more sensitive in this matter, then it might be too much too informal in the way that it is written. I kind of appreciated it really because epic fantasy often suffers from pompousness and self-importance, and this took the pompousness right out of it. Going from huge and epic to really tiny, we have the novella The Lemon Drop Kid by Josh Lanyon. This is technically a murder mystery, but to be honest, the mystery in this one isn't much of a mystery. So the romance aspect definitely takes center stage here, at least for me. And it is a second chance romance. The MC was put into jail, I think it is, the one that you are put into to await your trial. That's jail, right? Or is it prison? I keep confusing the two. Anyhow, our MC is waiting to go to trial for a murder he didn't commit when new information on the case comes to light and he is released in the light of this new information. And now, after half a year or maybe even 9 months in jail, he has to face his ex-boyfriend, who is the small town police detective, police officer, who worked very hard to put him in jail because he was convinced that our MC was guilty. As you can imagine, this has some really gut-wrenching scenes, really bleak scenes. And I think it just asks some interesting questions. I don't know if I always agree with the answers, but I think it was a very interesting read. Next, we have The Drowned World by J.G. Ballard. This was written in the 1960s and it is set in a near future in which a cosmic event led to a dramatic increase in temperature on Earth, which turned most of the previously non-tropic regions of the planet into tropical regions and into a tropical archipelago, a landscape which is reminiscent of that of the Triassic period, complete with gigantic ferns and gigantic lizards. And this Triassic-like landscape now makes some people regress to a brain state which they would have had they lived in the Triassic period. Now, this may sound like a story that Jordan Peterson might tell during a TED talk, but it couldn't be further from it. I got the impression that it wasn't at all meant to be taken very seriously. It's just a funny thought experiment. However, that doesn't mean that the writing doesn't take itself seriously. On the contrary, it really achieves being quite hypnotic, and you really feel with the characters who are experiencing this calling into the past, if you like, and you really get into their brain and almost experience this calling yourself. This was really impressive, I thought, and I'm looking very much forward now to reading Empire of the Sun by J.G. Ballard, which I've actually owned for a few years now. And then we have The Burning Plain by Michael Nava. This is the second to last of the Henry Rios mysteries about Henry Rios, who is a gay defense attorney in San Francisco and LA in the 1980s and 1990s. And I think the last book is set in 2000, maybe 2001. This series is quite gritty, quite bleak psychologically, but also in a very honest way. And Henry Rios, however, is not of the hard-boiled type. He just is a very good guy and has a heart of gold, and he just wants to be happy, but gets put through the ringer repeatedly in every book of the series, except maybe for the last book, which isn't one of my favorites in the series, but I was very grateful for it because it provided a happy ending. This, however, definitely not happy. Probably the bleakest of the series and my second favorite of the series after book one, the new rewritten book one. I'm going to talk about the series and the trickiness that comes with Michael Nava having rewritten parts of it in the future sometime. And now we are really getting to my absolute favorites. A Passage to India by E.M. Forrester. This is kind of the story of a tragic, star-crossed friendship between a British schoolteacher, an English schoolteacher, and a Muslimic Indian doctor, set in a fictitious town in northeast India, and set in the landscape of the difficult group dynamics of the society of the British Raj. E.M. Forrester always seems to have been quite ahead of his time. However, what I enjoyed most about this book wasn't really the broad aspects of race relations. Of course, these were interesting, but what I almost appreciated more was the many small observations that were made in this book. On the one hand, about interpersonal relationships, and on the other hand, about just a person's surroundings in general, the nature, the environment in the broadest sense. And it was a fantastic mixture of phrases and descriptions that made me go, yes, exactly, finally somebody says it. And on the other hand, oh wow, this is such a new way of looking at things. I would never have thought of it this way myself. It was the perfect mixture of these two reactions, these two kinds of observations. I really enjoyed reading this on a paragraph to paragraph basis, much more than I would have expected from this book. So now we have arrived at my three favorite books of the year so far. And I'm so glad that one of the three is a German novel. It is Dunkelblumen by Eva Menasse. It's a historical novel set in 1989 in a small town in eastern Austria, so right on the Iron Curtain, which is falling in the course of the novel. And this novel is a piece of what we call Aufarbeitung, an examination of the past. In this case, as often, it is the town's Nazi past. And the book explores why different kinds of people acted and act in the ways they did and do, and where that got them. And it also examines how people deal, or rather don't deal, with the memory of certain events in the town's collective history. This novel paints a picture of this fictitious town in a way that can only be called a symphony. And there is so much sharp insight in it, and so much sharp humor, and it is a really merciless post mortem. And yet, it is also filled with a lot of warmth and understanding of the machinations of the human mind, I think. I'm not sure if this has been translated into English yet, but it has been translated into several European languages. So do look up if your language is among them if you don't read German. From Austria to Mexico, we have a novel that I can only describe as delightful. It is Tu sueño Imperial han sido by Alvaro Enrique, You Dreamed of Empires in English, which is an imagining and a reimagining of the encounter between Hernan Cortes and Moctezuma on the eve of the Spanish conquista of the Aztec Empire. This is often described as psychedelic, and it definitely is, but most of all, it is hilariously funny and so cinematic. There were a lot of scenes that felt like I was watching an Asterix cartoon. And this novel is irreverent in all the right ways. On the one hand, it is extremely respectful. You can tell the deep respect that Alvaro Enrique has for his history, Aztec history, by how deeply his knowledge of the time, the history, and the culture is. On the other hand, all the people on both sides get dragged through the mud if and when they deserve it. And this is the best kind of historical novel, I think. The kind that takes things both very seriously and not at all seriously whatsoever. And finally, the last of my three favorite reads of the year, and in some respect, my ultimate favorites, Notes from the Burning Age by Claire North. This is Cli-Fi, set in a mid-distant future in which humanity has picked itself up again after a cataclysmic watershed event reduced population on the planet dramatically and forced humanity to downright reinvent itself and rethink its relationship with the planet. And this reimagination has led to really a rather good life for all of humanity. However, some people just aren't content being content, and they desire more and more, even if it comes at the expense of everything that has been achieved, and even if it puts in jeopardy the delicate equilibrium that has been achieved for the global human community and really the whole planetary community. This is on the surface a spy thriller, but it is extremely slow. And really, what's in the center of this novel is that it gets into the mind of the main character and lets us experience how this main character thinks and feels about the world that he lives in. And not just things, but more to the point, how he perceives the world that he lives in. In some cases, this feels like a downright fever dream. And I just loved being in this character's head and seeing the world through his eyes. And it was really a very comforting experience. All in all, now that I look at this stack of favorite books, I think that this first half of the year has been extremely successful. I made some amazing new discoveries, and I read some books that I think will stay with me for a long time. And if in the remaining 6 months of the year I'll be able to build another stack of this quality, I will consider myself a very lucky reader indeed. So here they are again, my favorite books of the year, minus the couple of ebooks that were on this list. I think I'm still going to do the mid-year book freakout tag because I'll be able to talk about some books with this tag that I haven't mentioned in this video. So I'll see you very soon, guys. Bye.